this is something that actually the chemists, they all disagree with me, all of them, right? It's like really funny. If we played cards and I got a royal flush, played poker, you'd be like, wow, I've never seen that before. And probably never see it again. But just because you get a royal flush once, most people are like, yeah, we can get a royal flush again, no problem. Now, if you think about it, all the chemistry we have on Earth is so contingent upon interactions of minerals, chance events, a catalyst. In fact, any molecule you find on Earth that's got a molecular weight, I have to think about this carefully. Any molecule, not polymer like tar or something, any molecule has a molecular weight probably greater than about 300 mass units on Earth, has somehow been interacted with or invented by evolution. That's kind of insane. So if you go back to the origin of Earth, where all the molecules are really small, I think there is such a vast chemical space available. There's literally zero chance you're going to get the life we have now.
Lee Cronin is on a mission to de novo evolve life on Earth from non-life.
An alien life form in a laboratory on Earth. And he seems like he's well on his way. And so our conversation stretches from the nitty-gritty of the technology that he is using to create that, to the theoretical underpinnings of it, to a surprisingly simple and effective definition for life itself.
This is a really fun conversation. And folks, if you already support us on Patreon, it's awesome. We're really starting to grow this thing. We're hopefully going to be able to put out more episodes soon. We're going to have a new studio showing up any day now. If you don't have any bread to kick us on Patreon, just share the episodes. That's the only way we're reaching people. And if you really love what we do, consider coming by and checking out the page, because we're getting together with patrons once a week, and it's really helping us steer the ship.
And we'd love it. Patreon.com/demystifysci. Hopefully we'll see you there. In the meantime, enjoy the conversation with Lee Cronin. We'll see you next week.
The scientific revolution starts now.
The Demystify Sci podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
Obsessed about these things. I'm my main obsession, where no expense is spared, is on computers and SSD speed and data storage. I kind of manage about half a petabyte of data.
What's a petabyte? Sorry, I should know that, but I don't.
Like 1,000 is 1,000 terabytes.
Wow.
I think of that order. It might even be more than that. I think it's 1,000 terabytes.
What is all that data?
It's mainly copies. So I'm kind of what I used to. So I'm a control freak. So when I started or data control freak, because I don't have time to be a control freak. So when I started my research group, I installed a server and said to all the people, don't ever store anything on your computer. Use the server, please. I'll do the same. And then the server just grew and grew. It became more mission critical. So I'd have redundant backups. So I'd have a RAID, and then I'd buy a second one as a backup. And then the one was getting old and it was still going. So I then keep it. And so now I have 6. It's identical. So the data is actually got 6-fold redundancy on site, and then 2-fold redundancy off site. And then we have scratch disks. And it's quite useful, because obviously things change in time. And the way I back things up is there's obviously an instant backup, right? A RAID, and also a kind of like a shadow volume copy. And then that snapshots every hour. And then the other server snapshots every day. And the other one snapshots every week. And the other one snapshots every month. Because occasionally some of my superstars delete a file, some data, and they don't notice for a while. And then one of the server is an aggregator. It never deletes, it just copies. So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because all the stuff that's deleted is still there.
Wow. I thought I was pretty good at backing up once a week, but this is a whole nother level.
I'm at once every probably 150 days, and so I'm definitely not on this level.
I'm the archivist for this project.
Absolutely.
Do you find yourself going back to that old data frequently, or what's the oldest piece that you've dug up?
So occasionally, because my university occasionally brings in we're gonna have fair access to our data, and I'm like, dude, I have my data back for 20 years. I went, go on then. So I went back to my first ever PhD student, went into his folder, dragged out an Excel file which had a pH titration in it. I can access the data, and the guy's like, I give up. This is great. Carry on.
That's amazing.
And I have a radical openness. So I have all the alumni there, so all the people there. So really, if you're in my group and you do stuff, we're totally open. So really, you have to stand behind your data forever. But that means you can look at other people's work, and you can help. All my grant proposals are there. All the papers that are published, along with the rejections and the replies to referees and the links to raw data, all there. And you can see the progression of grant proposals, grants that are funded, papers that are proposed, papers are written, everything in plain sight, so that everyone collaborate.
Did you say you were keeping your own servers, or that you were buying server space somewhere? I missed that.
I keep all of them. I
keep it
trust the cloud.
Okay.
And
yeah, because we looked into that in grad school, and it was just the expense was too much. We ended up just getting regular old RAIDs and backing things up manually.
I mean, I do use Dropbox, so my papers in progress folder that the group use on my server has a synchronization to my Dropbox. So I'm traveling, I can collaborate with my team, and that's really important.
Is there any part of the server that the public can access?
No.
Because I've always wondered about that, right? So some people will publish papers and they'll put out data sets, and the data is almost exclusively relegated to the world of academia. But if somebody wants to go and look through some part of the data, or let's say that they want to start, because we talk to a lot of garage hobbyists, people that are probably interested in pursuing this kind of work outside of the academy. Is there some way that they can become versed enough to look at the data, or is it just...
So yeah, that's a really good point. So one thing I think we do reasonably well, and actually you ask it's kind of a good point, never thought of it that way, because I wouldn't give it public access to my data, not because I don't think they're smart enough to do anything with it. Of course they are. I just don't want to bore them with all the repetition and all the nonsense, right? Because there's like a bit of culture in there as well that they may not get because not the context. So what we do a lot of is we build a lot of robots, and I publish the exact builder materials, like the part numbers, the code, everything, like an IKEA kit. Follow this, start here, go here, reproduce it. So we do that a lot. But what you're saying is like, well, why not just dump it all online? There might be an argument for me my group is 20 years old. There might be an argument to say, dump all your data online between 2002 and 2012. What do you lose? And the answer is probably nothing. And as long as people went to it in good faith and not, demonstrate what a bad scientist I am and everything I've done wrong in my life, which there would be some, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a cool idea. But I never ever turned down a request for data. In fact, I got someone trolling me, and I won't explain I can explain the exact context of the assembly theory. So I invented this theory. Some computational guy hated me, bullied me, and I pointed out he was bullying me, and he's like, "No, you're not. You're just an idiot. I'm not bullying you. You're just completely stupid." And I'm like, I think that's what bullying is like. I think that's kind of it. You're not willing to have an argument, and also in the context of the conversation he came to me and said, "You're doing this wrong. I'm a genius. I can help you." And I was like, okay, why am I doing it wrong? And he said like this. I said, no, that's not correct. We're doing like this. And he just said, oh, I won't help you then. And he published a blog and fabricated correspondence we had. And I pointed that out to my team. And then he came back to me and we started a discussion. Anyway, years went by. This guy contacted me and asked me for all my data of the paper and the algorithm. I just gave it to him. So I gave him the data, gave him the algorithm, gave him stuff. And then suddenly last week, a paper came out with this guy as the first author saying,
whoa,
why this theory is basically not correct.
Wow.
And I was like, and it was written in such a bad faith argument. You'll be able to find it. I probably shouldn't name it because out of respect for my team and my collaborators, but it's one of the nicest set of criticisms ever because it's so unprofessional and so badly done that it's obvious that we can just say, no, this is a miscomprehension. but I feel bad for the student. But actually, the student contacted me in good faith, and we had a really nice correspondence. I just gave him the data. And so really, if someone asked me for data, taxpayer paid for the data, the universe paid for the data. It's incumbent upon me, as long as it's not commercially restricted in some way, to give everyone the data. Why not?
Do you feel any responsibility to respond to it, or is it just such a bad faith argument that
we are going to respond at 2 responses? But I think it's a bit like the Barbara Streisand effect. I think it is the Barbara Streisand. She started complaining because her privacy was, someone was looking at a house, and then when she complained, everyone just went and looked at the house. So what we don't want to do is over-respond. But at the same time, we've developed a technique to go and find aliens probabilistically, and this person is saying that can't work. And what he's been doing is trying to troll people at NASA and other people that are doing like what we're doing, and try and non-experts and try and basically troll. So I think what we've got to do, and this is a really good exercise. I'm sorry, we're starting all over the place, but I'll just finish this and let you have the control back.
That's how we like to do it. It's fine. You're good.
Okay.
It's interesting.
And I think then it's a really good argument, really good for my researchers who obviously are passionate about what they're doing, but hopefully receptive to just being completely wrong, because you have to be we're wrong more than we're right. And it's quite fun to be wrong.
I wish people would come to understand that about science in general. It's quite frustrating, because the whole idea of science is that it's a living discipline that's constantly updating its priors and so forth. Exactly.
And so what we have to do correctly is first of all, is bad faith, really unprofessional. But let's say to my group, ignore that. What is wrong with our theory? What do they mean? What's happened? Just treat it in good faith. Take all the emotion away. And they said, no. And when you can see actually what the authors have attempted to do is a kind of political, kind of almost I have an agenda and I will make my agenda and this is it. So we were able to kind of disprove it, but we had to do it in such a way that an intelligent non-specialist who's worried they might commit some money or some time to something we're proposing, that this is, it's not like we're saying, hey, we've invented cold fusion. Right, because if you go back to in a few years ago, there are a bunch of guys, 2 guys, Pons and Fleischmann, doing some experiments, and they did a press release before they published the paper to say, "Hey, we did cold fusion, and we got more energy out of this experiment than we put in."
Was that the lattice confined fusion paper?
Sorry?
Was that the lattice confined fusion paper? Was that from NASA? I see. Okay,
something like this. Now, actually, what that turns out is, it's not fusion. There's something odd going on, but we still don't know what that is because we lack the tools to correctly measure and reproduce the experiment. And so I don't believe in cold fusion. But the thing is, where we are with this theory is we have a theory, we have got an experiment. The experiment probabilistically give us the correlation. It may not be 100% right, but the correlation is there and it's quite nice. And it enables people to actually work out what life is in the end. And so, so my team are kind of a little bit upset because of the nature. And I want to basically show that science is much better natured than that. And what you can do is if you're willing to be completely wrong, right? I'm a professional idiot. And what I mean by that is maybe that's wrong to say I'm professional. I'm a professional scientist in that I do have investment in my ideas, but what I have more investment in it, and it does serve me well, is reality. And that basically, when I force reality to bend to my will, it doesn't. I have to bend to its will and say, what is the discrepancy? I wanted this to be correct. It's not. I had to add an offset. And that process has allowed me to have fun and actually come up with things that have stood the test of time. And I think that is a really nice way to teach science, to say, obviously you're invested in some things. You want to be able to help people create a new narrative, but what's more important is to come up with a something that's getting approximately closer to what you might call a ground truth, but you're never going to get there. So in a way, I'm if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But sometimes, what excites me is every day I wake up and I'm still right on a couple of things, and and I'm wrong on a couple of things. Well, phew, I can do that. And I think what happens is people invest so much in a single thing that they are unwilling, unable, incapable of going back, and then pride gets in the way, and then all this nonsense, and they invoke all sorts of constants, and you have Einstein and cosmological constant, and we're still paying for that even today.
It's crazy because when you go back into the history of science, like even a couple hundred years, I mean, it's a very new idea, the modern concept of science, but you go back and you look, and all of these people were very generalist scientists. They were studying the stars and medicine and the atom, and it seemed okay that some of these heroes of science were like completely wrong about certain things. You look at Newton, like he thought photons were like these little blobs of material that were flying around through space, but nobody cares because he nailed a bunch of other things. Is there a way like that you encourage your students to be comfortable with being wrong? Like, is there a way to really encourage scientists in general? Like, how do we, because right now when you have like prizes being, like, how do you walk back on a Nobel Prize, for instance, that kind of thing. It's like, there's this idea that things are uncovered with certainty and then we move on. And I think it's a bit of a disservice.
I think you're peeling an onion, right? So what I do is I really love coming up with ideas. Well, I'm quite forceful with my ideas. And I think that some of my team have sometimes said, that's really off-putting. And I'm like, yeah, but at the beginning that is, but just wait. And they're like, why? Well, just wait. And they're like, and we have these ideas. I'm like, we're going to do that. It's brilliant. It's definitely going to work. And come back next day and went, that was stupid. Why did I come up with that? What do you think? Yeah, that was stupid. And then so I think if I'm willing to basically have conviction on an idea on one day and the next day go, that was nonsense. And then we keep doing that as a team and we kind of pass the idea baton around. What that allows people to do with some confidence is say, is play. I have to create an environment where it's literally science play time, where people are willing and able. A few years ago, I published a paper in Nature on an artificial intelligence that does some organic chemistry. This made all the organic chemists really unhappy. And I didn't know, unknown to me, a whole bunch of chemists went to disprove the AI couldn't discover a reaction. And they wrote a letter to the Nature saying, we have found a fault in Cronin's paper. And what happened is that this AI discovered a new molecule, right, that had a certain geometry. And we looked at the geometry and we did manual assignment, the human being. So the poor human, who was a brilliant genius postdoc, did it. There were two possible assignments and we didn't know which one was correct. And we wrote it actually in the paper. We went, we'll pick that one because why not? It looks cool. And the only error these guys could find was that we manually misassigned a structure, which was of no consequence, right? It was like A or B. And then this guy wrote this letter to say why the paper was wrong because we got one thing wrong. They were so happy to find this culture. They were so happy to find this wrong thing. I had people ringing me up and say, oh, your Nature paper was wrong. I was like, we just corrected it. Look, that's how science works, right? It's quite cool. The stereochemistry is now correct. But the fact of the paper was we used a neural network to vary reactions and we discovered new chemistry with no kind of intention. That was the idea. So I said, ironically, the AI was right and the human being failed. So,
I mean, I think that people are really alarmed by large changes to a discipline, especially when you start thinking about AI in terms of science and you start thinking about the way that science is done, which is that there's kind of two aspects to it. One of which is the purely technological engineering aspect of actually performing the experiments, right? You have to have somebody who does it. And then the other one is the imagination of the experiment. And if you gradually erode the area of expertise of the human, you create a condition where people are very, very scared for the position that they will occupy. Because if you propose that there is an intelligent neural network or computer program or whatever you want to call it that can play the role of scientist, you are suddenly thrusting this discipline that sees itself as being largely isolated from the regular world, right? As scientists, we kind of float in this world of ideas, and scientists are very special and they're very, very distinct from the regular person who doesn't ask, how does this work? And if you propose that you can replace that with a computer program, I think that you strike fear into the hearts of these people, and that is the source of the agony that you experience on the other side.
Well, it's not only that. So a couple of things. The good news is that AIs don't exist, right? That all AI is well, let's take AI, procedural AI, that's just a series of rules. Let's take machine learning. When machine learning, we're basically doing regression, and it's lit. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand AI. AI is a tool like a test tube, right? And there's lots of AI researchers that will argue with me, but they will be wrong in this instance. And I will challenge them to be wrong for an experiment. And it kind of goes like this, like the AI is instantiated by the human. The human has to decide what data to collect, and then whether it's supervised or unsupervised, the AI is doing something. And for me, what I find really troublesome right now is that there is I think you're absolutely right. There's a third disconnect. There is a disconnect in what we are, what philosophy is of science, to say, what is it to design an experiment? What is it to get experimental data? And what is it to infer a connection between that data and a complex system? So Max Tegmark has a good program called AI Feynman. And what it will do is it will use basically some machine learning tools to infer some rules of physics. But the thing is, they're quite complex. If you take the law of gravity, the force of gravity is proportional to the product of the two masses falling in together or being attracted together divided by the r squared between them. That is a beautiful insight that a human being saw because they used their intuition and they compressed all that data. And I would argue that ground truths are the minimally compressed representation of that phenomena. And AIs don't tend to do that very well. They can, and what they do is they come up with lots of different representations, but the human being makes the decision. The human decides to do the experiment. So where the humans become fearful is actually, ironically, those humans that are not thinking and are not truly designing experiments, and they are turning a handle. And I guess that is tricky because there are some jobs that aren't that creative will be replaced by AI.
And there's a lot of scientists that aren't that creative. Like that feels transgressive to say out loud, but I think that not everybody is a visionary. Not everybody is putting together really astonishing experiments. A lot of people are laboring under a relatively established model system, and they work within that model system. And what they do is they do iterations, and that is probably something that an AI can do. There's a difference between vision and just day-to-day execution. And I think that vision is a rare quantity in the world in any discipline. Science is not
I wanted to say
unique.
there's one thing really interesting about that inverse square law relationship too, which is that for a while, Kepler had this relationship between period and the radius, right? And this is basically scaled by some missing factor. And it took a human being to come along and develop the concept of mass, actually, which was Newton's real achievement. Was he was like, no, that constant for each system is actually a product of this idea that atoms are pulling on one another. And there's this whole new paradigm that opens up. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that a computer can pull off. It is this actual next level of conceptualization.
That is actually a really good point, because the same thing happened in electricity, where you go all of a sudden from not really having electricity to 130 years later, everybody's investigating this phenomenon of electric fire. And what you can see is that somebody literally has to codify. Like it's this guy named like William Gibson of Colchester, who literally is doing a study on magnets. And along the way, he's like, oh, by the way, there's also this thing that I'm going to call it electricity, and it happens when you rub amber with a piece of wool. And that's what sets it off, right? It's going from that point. It's like Newton inventing mass. William Gibson, I don't actually know if it's Gibson, but this guy in Colchester inventing the idea that you can...
I lived not very close from Colchester when I was growing up as a kid, so in the UK.
I think it's Colchester, but I don't know if it's William Gibson. That's the guy who wrote Neuromancer, and so I think that it's like...
When we come back, one thing about science, I think that I think there's a big place for what you call ordinary science, and I think there's a big place for people doing, like, I want to do or I like doing incremental science, right? I want to do also non-incremental science. I do think it's incumbent upon us as scientists to not look down on the act of reproduction of the stuff and doing those iterations. Those iterations are important. I would say those iterations elements of them can be replaced by some algorithmic process, but you still need some training, some problem solving to do that. So I think it just scales on different levels. And the problem is if you go too much of a vision area, you're like just making stuff up that can never be instantiated. And if you're too incremental, you're like, yeah, I know that. I know that's already. And so our role, I think, is to kind of scale between those. I think whether you're the workman or the innovator in between, I really love being both. I don't mind getting my hands dirty and getting data. It's like, get the data, have the idea, get the data, see what happens. Go and moving between those domains and showing people how it's done. Some people find it harder than others because you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to do an experiment that we don't know the answer to. And everyone's like, what? I mean, in an organic chemistry lab, if you just say to a chemist, go and discover a new reaction, they'll be like, how do I do that? I'm like, can I swear, by the way? Just mix some shit in a pot and set fire to it. They're like, they would never do that. I mean, the safety officer would be all over them. It's like, come on, live a little. Because sometimes you see a phenomena, what happened there? And so actually what an organic chemist tends to do, and I'm not dissing on organic chemists because they're brilliant, is they're target driven. For them, they're chess players. They're like, I'm going to make the most elegant move I can in this game. This game is called organic chemistry. I know these reactions, and you're going to give me a target, and I'm going to take my reactions and get to that target, and I will not deviate. I'm just not a very good chess player. So I'm like, I'll just put it in a pot and set fire to it.
Go ahead. That's a really, really old way of doing science. Like if you look back, for example, again, the study of electricity, there's this guy, Francis Hauksbee, who invents a vacuum pump. And then he just puts shit in the vacuum pump. He's like, what happens when I put mercury in the vacuum pump? What happens when I put water in the vacuum pump? What happens when I spin amber against wool in the vacuum pump?
That's so cool.
Such an important piece, though. I mean, I'm so glad to hear you use that word play. I thought that, actually, I had an amazing experience in grad school. I had an amazing advisor. And when I first showed up in his lab, after I found a way to get into the lab in the first place, which was not easy. And he basically said, okay, now just take a year and play. Like, he goes, an average Nature paper costs about $500,000. So that's the budget. And let's find something really cool here. And like, it was crazy. There was like no direction whatsoever. Just we were trying to build a new kind of microscope basically and try to see something nobody had ever seen before. And it was wild. It just kind of overloaded my mind at first. But I think that it's critical to making discoveries. If you really want to discover something new, you have to look where people have never looked before. You're going to have to maybe invent tools. Like it's a long and hard road, but it's fun too.
I'm a really poor scientist in that regard, but I have two tricks. Buy technology that you find that no one else has yet got if you can get the money, because you could always do something new with it. That's cutting edge science. And go to a couple of different disciplines and take their idea, or don't take, just maybe ask permission and just mix them together. Like if all else fails, it's like, okay, that's how I started 3D printing chemistry. It's like, right, so I'm doing boring chemistry here. There's a 3D printer here, looks pretty boring. Okay, I'll take the boring chemistry and the boring 3D printer, and then like 10 years later, I'm digitizing chemistry and writing chemical code. And I was just kind of, oh, that's a cool idea. Because in the 3D printer, you have this code, this G code, which basically is this kind of combination of Cartesian coordinates, turning the print head on and extruding things, having the temperature, so you can create this object. And I was like, oh, the robot does what it's told. My grad students don't do what they told. In fact, they hate being doing what they told. Why don't I just replace them each with it was a joke, right? I was just like, it was being fun one day. It's like, oh, why don't I just replace you with a 3D printer? Or what? Actually, no, that's rude. Why don't I give you a 3D printer so you know what you've done? So, you don't just write down in your lab book what you think you've done. You give me the code you've actually executed. And that was great fun. It's like, so I think things like that are really good. But having that type of playtime is really something I try to generate. But there's a challenge, right? Because it does overload your mind. And some of my grad students are like so offended I do the same thing pretty much to every student. I kind of gauge where they are on the scale of comfort, and I just nudge out the comfort zone. And the problem is I have to pay. Well, it's not a problem. It's just something I've noticed I have to pay attention to. There's a difference between causing someone's kind of intellectual discomfort and causing them emotional and actually distress, right? And then you say, look, you're doing this thing, you don't know what you're doing, you feel like you're an idiot, everything's failing. Don't worry, you're fine. You're not terminally ill, you're not depressed. And if they take it personally, that can be a problem. So I have to pay a lot of attention when I'm nudging people, particularly when they've come from a discipline where it's very tradition, and say, you must act like this, you mustn't question the boss. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. Of course you question me. I woke up one morning and I found this dirt on the floor that was oriented this way, clockwise towards the sun. I'm like, is that meaningful? And they'd be like, no. And
yeah,
and you're like, but it might be.
It didn't work out for everybody. There's a lot of people who came through that environment and just couldn't work under those conditions, with nobody telling.
Why I generate lots of different projects. So they're projects where I'm kind of imposing my guidance, say, I know this is going to work. I know it's going to work. It's going to be brilliant. And then you get some students go, nah, it's definitely not going to work, but we'll work together. And then and I say, oh yeah, you're right, it's wrong, but we increment up and do something. Whereas we say, okay, I want to search for general phenomena here. I think there's something interesting here. Let's play for a bit. Here's a rough budget. Here's a rough idea. And what I try and do, because my group is relatively large, I really have a duty of care to take people from, I shouldn't say that. I kind of almost hire people randomly, right? It's like, because I can't tell. As long as they're motivated and, they're not an axe murderer, and, just get them in the lab, do stuff. Try not pay too much attention to their background and their intellectual supposed achievements or not, and just nudge them and see what they can do. And having a collection of people like that from different backgrounds, even before it became fashionable, right? I don't even tell people that that's how I do it. You just create some really interesting environments. But what I have to do is provide a professional safety net so that people are, if they feel so disturbed, they feel out of control, that they've been given too much freedom, you just say, walk them back a bit. Say, well, no, we can do this. It's fine. Because after all, in a chemistry lab, if things go wrong, you could have a dangerous accident. You could have an accident, an explosion and other things. And, or you might be really successful and make an alien life form that takes over the planet, which is my goal. But I can't really say that openly on a podcast. Oops.
Are the aliens paying you for that?
Come on. I hope so.
Well, hold on. If you make the life form, how could it possibly be alien?
Mm.
No, I'm not a creationist, I've often said, but I want to be one.
Yeah, that's fine. But I feel like at that point, it would be just another human invention, like alien.
Right. So joking aside, sorry to interrupt. What I mean is, so obviously I want to set up the conditions to make a life form. If that happens, you just say, well, you just made that. Correct. So now I say, right, how do I cheat to set up that life? How did I cheat to set up the life form? And how likely is it that these processes could occur on Mars or Venus? And so what you do is you dial back and you put in less and less information. And I think we're getting to the point where we should be cheat. We could cheat tomorrow. Craig Venter already cheated. He made a life form. He made an alien. But it's not an alien. It's part of our synthetic biology. He took a genome from an existing parasite, facsimiled that genome, made it in a laboratory, put it into a cell replicated. Hallelujah. New life form. No, he facsimiled a life. Now we're going back a step and say, right, how do we put sand literally on a shaker? You might find on a beach, might find in deep sea or something, with some water, with some very simple chemicals, and cheat with purpose and see how we start to get towards life. And then if we're fortunate enough to actually start seeing those mechanisms, we can ask, how do we cheat? What effect does that have? Cheat in a different way. And then to underline, because it's a bit like looking at gravity, right? Gravity is a force, exists in the entire universe. We're not cheating by basically building an archway to stop the thing. We are harnessing it, right? And we understand it. We build lots of different architectures we understand. The process that gives rise to life is a general phenomenon in the universe. And that's the thesis. So let's try and make you discover that phenomenon in the lab and make a life form. Great, we'll do that. And we made that one. Let's go in the lab and do a different lab in a different place with different stuff and make another one. Say, right, do we have two distinct life forms that share no commonality in the molecular machinery that does it? But you can see the process of selection, complexification, evolution, and speciation. So basically, at the bottom, you have selection when things are just developing a memory. You build a minimal machine, whatever that is, in chemistry, and then you then get evolutionary processes, which then make different types of machine that then start to compete with each other. So you have that speciation as you then produce your new ecosystem.
Or cooperating with each other.
Or I mean, it could be I mean, does evolution have to always? Is evolution always adversarial? Well, we see in nature that you see adversarial behavior, cooperative behavior. I think they can coexist. I don't know, right? But you're absolutely right.
If you wanted to make a life form that was going to take over the planet, you would assume that evolving a cooperative life form would be much more effective than a competitive one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm joking there. I do not want to make a life form that overtakes the planet, but I do want to make a life form. And I think, there's probably less danger in me making a life form of genetic engineering, kind of doing stuff wrong with existing biology. So my argument, and I have this discussion a lot openly, so people say, whoa, hang on a minute, are Terminators coming out of your lab soon? And I say, well, no, we're trying to look for phenomena of life, and we're not using current existing technology of life. So if we make something that is interesting in organic life, it's going to occupy a different niche. It's unlikely to be competing for land space and other stuff. So we should be fine. But of course, we'll do containment. We'll keep it, But the thing is, in the time of everyone thinks COVID was made in a lab, there's nothing I can say. So I'll just say, screw it. We're going to make a life form. And if it overtakes the planet, that's God's way. No, sorry, that's evolution's way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so funny, actually, that God has been swapped out for evolution. But they're both, like, evolution as an actor is equally mystical, because you're treating like a concept as if it's an autonomous entity that has intention and so forth.
Indeed, that's why the argument I have about God did not exist at the beginning of the universe if you're a materialist, but it's quite clear, it's undeniable that God exists now, but not as a mythical being that has power, but an abstraction in our heads. So when we invoke, you know what I mean. You might say, well, what do you mean by God? Do you mean are you a monotheist? How many different gods do you have, and what are the properties of your God? And I'm really interested in those people that believe in an all-powerful God, because I'm like, what does this being actually do? How does it compute? How many flops does it have available? And even if, how does it pass the question? It's like a kind of, so then people are like, what are you actually talking about? So let's just engineer a God. If God doesn't exist, why don't we make one?
I feel like Don Hoffman's kind of on the trail to do something like that. He's at least trying to calculate God by doing these summations of different conscious agents. There's a kind of interesting paper where
God is everything. Like, it's the sum total of all things.
The sum total of all perspectives, or something like that.
Yeah. I think that's kind of trickery.
Interesting. Wow.
And one of the things I try to do as a scientist is and as also a communicator of science, is I do not like to play magic tricks when communicating. And I'm not saying Donald Hoffman is doing that on purpose, but
it speaks intuitively to my understanding of God, because I remember for a long time
he's hacking your intuition. But then when you falsify that, you see that's incorrect. He's just emotionally playing because, oh yeah, it feels good. It's like, yeah, okay, make it falsifiable. You can't make it falsifiable. We can talk about it in the pub and say it's cool, but don't then pretend something is science when it's not.
Well, it's unclear. Yeah, I think it's basic mathematics, and that's the thing. It's like it's not totally clear that math is science. It's a wonderful tool and so forth, but you can't actually make explanatory statements with math. You can only make descriptive statements with math, and there's like a fuzzy line there. So the fact that he's able to describe it this way doesn't necessarily explain it.
And I also think that it's fundamentally a simulation theory. which is that
ultimately, yeah.
right, it's the world that we experience is encoded by something that lies beyond it. And what lies beyond it, if not just a computer that's representing what we have, because you get to the bottom of it and physics will tell you that it's math. And if the bottom of everything is math, to me, that's a simulation theory.
Yeah, I mean, that can be debunked in probably 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get a lot of
The chemists are the chemists are well placed to debunk this.
Yeah, the chemists are the
right. So we are in a simulation, but only a simulation in our own minds. And the idea that there's math at the bottom it has to be wrong.
Why?
Now we'll explain why that's wrong in a moment, because math is a language that we built to represent reality. And then we suddenly go, oh, suddenly math is reality. It's like, no, actually, reality is not made up of math. It's like you're getting it the wrong way around. But let's talk about the simulation theory. Now, the way I would debunk it is as follows. And I think this is where we get into an open-ended set where it should work. So I'm going to do this precisely. So the reason why that we can't be in a simulation is because novelty exists. So what is novelty? Novelty is the creation of a unique new object that really has very little precedent in the past, requires a leap of intuition, a leap of faith, a leap of stuff. Now, we might argue, and if I come out as an assembly theorist or someone who believes in the past, that you should always be able to see where those leaps come. But actually, what you can see is that doesn't work. So a universe that's a simulation will never have novelty in it. Everything in the universe will be compressible. There'll be some relationship, some procedural thing. Where I think we're living in a universe that is not fixed in time. And where novelty comes from is the universe is expanding in terms of the number of options available. And because the universe is expanding all the time, the computer that's required to simulate that universe can never be big enough if you have time and action and novelty. And if you do the math carefully, you get basically incompleteness. And I think incompleteness in a way explain, and this fact you can't prove certain statements in mathematics means there's something beyond it. But it doesn't mean that it's out with mathematics for very long. Because as soon you're in a universe, and I'll say, I'm going to have a wild leap. It's an intangible, crystallized, boom, in the universe. I can then make it part of the universe and explain it. And that's why we get into the simulation illusion. Because when I create my new thing that's novel, everyone then sees it, and it's no longer novel because I can describe it. So the simulationists should be able to predict the future. But then you invoke an argument to say, oh, but the simulation cannot, because we're making this fancy computer program. I say, okay, so where does the novelty come from? Because let's just say we're a simulation in a simulation in a simulation in a simulation. There must be novelty coming from the substrate. Where is that substrate?
When you say novelty, do you mean the novelty of our own ideas? What do you mean by novelty here?
Yeah, so mathematically, what I mean by novelty is if you come up with, say, a new verb in language, Shakespeare did it a lot, or you came up with a new impressionist painting, or you came up with a new machine to solve a problem. Let's invent a machine. I'm going to invent a helicopter that flies underwater with, I don't know, and is able to, dig tunnels and mine, I don't know, uranium and gold as it goes or something, right?
Like
come up with something ridiculous that no one's done before. Now what you do is you type that up in Google and you'll probably find that someone has precisely done that. And so what I mean is you have a big, in a way, novelty is like, I have a database, a library of all possible things. And then I create a thing. And then I say, right, how close is this thing to everything in the library? And if it is equally distant from, or not equally distant, if it's just distant from everything, then you might say, in some mathematical sense, I could not have predicted that object from the data I already had, and therefore it's truly novel. So if I cannot predict the thing that I've made using my prior information, then I would suggest it was novel.
I think this gets at the real heart of the difference between intelligence and what computers do as well. Because intelligence to me seems like the ability to actually generate novel concepts, which is linking a new layer of abstraction, like taking two concepts or even really just two pieces of material and making something new out of them. This is a really functional difference between what computers do. And I'm not sure that I think it kind of invalidates the word artificial intelligence because it's not really doing this.
I think that you're right. Like this is the definition that we've kind of come to a lot, which is that intelligence is the ability to link concepts together that have not been linked together yet.
And in like a meaningful, productive way, yeah.
Sure. But my point, you said something interesting, which is that if you have this database of things or ideas or discoveries, and then somebody comes up with something like an impressionist painting that sits on top of them, it's hard. I see things in such an interconnected and no man is an island sort of way, where I'm like, that person didn't invent that painting. That person looked at a million paintings and went out into the world and saw how people were doing things and
saw the times that they were living in and integrated all of this. But there is this leap where they put it all together, and it's not totally clear that computers can do that leap.
Yeah. I guess even as I'm saying it, I'm thinking of like Mucha's art versus Monet's, or like somebody who invents a style.
So I think so this is really, really important, and I really sympathize with your view. And also I can see you struggling, right? I'm struggling as well with what we mean. So of course, my future is informed by my past, but my interaction at my event horizon going into the future, because I would posit the following conjecture, and I'm going to put this in as simple as possible. If the box of the universe is fixed, it's like a book, I just look everything up and I go there, and I should be in principle, be able to predict the future, right? I think that most physicists think that is true. But what I think we're going to discover very soon is no matter how much knowledge we have about the past, because the universe is inflating, the number of states available is always bigger in the future than it was in the present. The universe is intrinsically creative. And novelty and this creativity is evidence of fundamental time, the fact we can't be in a simulation, and there's something beyond mathematics that we don't yet understand. But it doesn't mean we're not ever going to be able to understand it. It's not like this. I'm saying that I'm a dualist. I'm very much a materialist, but I take Roger Penrose's view. I just don't know what the material is.
Yeah.
And it's like this echo state, right? We can make a new verb. Let's make up a new verb.
Gwindling.
Okay, what is that?
It is the process of examining the expanding universe and attempting to explain novelty.
There we go.
While seeing yourself shrink.
So there you go. You've made a new verb. There was no way the universe was going to predict that happen. GPT-3 wouldn't predict that. That's the fascinating thing about human interacting with sentient beings that are consciously integrating. And I think we will make objects things that will do this. And it's going to be fascinating. We will have AGIs that do this, but not now, not for 100 years we do this. We'll get more and more fooled, and we'll get more and more depressed because we'll be really bored. Like, you've done that again. Right? You've done that.
It's also really interesting that there's this gap between the mathematics and what's actually happening, because oftentimes we discover these quantitative relationships long before we can even start to pin a material explanation on them. And I think gravity is a great example, because it was increasingly ascribed to material interactions. Like, we developed this concept of mass, but still, like, to this day, it's not totally clear how atoms are actually pulling on one another physically in a material sense. This is still relegated to the math. We can describe it very perfectly, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have a place to hang these explanations. And I find that there's kind of a weird gaping hole in the academy somewhere between physics and philosophy where nobody wants to really get into that stuff. And this is maybe happened in the last 100 years or so, But I think that this preeminence of math and thinking that that's the end of the line is a real disservice to actually coming up with material-based explanations. I'm a material scientist by training, and so everything to me obviously must have some material basis in order for it to occur. Otherwise, we're talking about magic or something. And so I wonder how that preeminence of math is in some sense negatively warping in the way that students are learning about the universe.
I agree. And I think that this is a very good point. And one of the things I love doing in my research group is getting people from all different disciplines. One of the things that Glasgow has let me do almost uniquely, I don't think anyone anywhere, I mean, I'm so privileged to be able to do it, is I convinced them to let me hire not just chemists, but computer scientists and physicists and engineers, and they get chemistry degrees. All right. I remember the first computer science, I was like, I wouldn't get a chemistry PhD. Is that not dangerous? And like, well, not if you build a robot to do the chemistry for you. It's like, okay, cool. And what I think we do a lot is the computer scientists are really proud of their algorithms and their algorithmic universe. And I think that I would just like to have us all to have a little bit more humility for each other's discipline and say, computer science does a lot. It's amazing. But the universe, as far as I can see, isn't a computer, but it emerged the computer. And the same, I want to be, and of course I have views that are incorrect, and they can be corrected by people working in computational complexity theory and in fundamental quantum theory and quantum foundations and all this stuff. But I think that your visceral experience in stuff from lots of different disciplines, whether you're inside a microprocessor, in a biology lab, in a chemistry lab, discussing some kind of romantic philosophy, is all important. And we've just got to find a way of, I suppose, faithfully telling each other what our big question is. I remember a computer scientist friend, a very, very smart lady who was in York, and she really captivated kind of my imagination years ago when I was telling her about my dream of creating a life form. She says, I dream of creating a program that is so creative that if I turn off my computer, I feel like I'm making an act of murder. I'm like, wow. So she's like, and she's still, isn't that fascinating? She's like, and she wants to be surprised by her program. And I was like, she really made a profound effect on me, because I'm thinking, well, that'd be cool to do that in chemistry and a computer together. Maybe there's a hybrid way we could do it, to make something that's so generative, that's so unexpected, that who cares if it really is alive or not, or really is conscious or intelligent? If it keeps me happy for the rest of my life, then it's cool. And then we then start to, because we're going to have to develop new tools in science when we make AGIs, and they, how are we going to know they're conscious? Do we give them rights? Do they start tell us things about ourselves we don't want to know? Do they tell us about whether the universe is a simulation or not? I wrote this great short story actually on a simulation, on simulation theory, which goes along the lines of, I don't know if I can compress it very quickly. There's a planet elsewhere. They basically crack quantum computing so they can simulate the universe down to an infinite precision. And what they decide to do is they start simulating the future of their, bit like it's based on the program Devs. I don't know if you've seen Devs, where quantum, so they simulate their future, and the stock market keeps going crash because they keep shorting each other. So they outlaw basically simulating the future because that wasn't good for their economics. And then they said, okay, look, we found this planet Earth, which we think is about 10 light years away, and we're going to go there. It's going to take 20 light years. And then we went, 20 light years, $1 trillion. Why don't we just simulate it in our quantum simulator? We can simulate the exact future. And so the short story was like, there was this guy in Manhattan, drunk, basically stumbling in the shadows, and he thought he was being a ghost, and there was a ghost chasing him. But it turned out he was the simulator, the life form simulated in this quantum computer on this other planet, because the aliens couldn't be asked to actually physically go to Earth.
This sounds pretty good. I want to read it. Where do you publish these?
I haven't published. I mean, I'm such a terrible writer. I can send it to you. I'm
Okay.
going to start writing some of these things here and there, but it literally, I had a little writing club I was part of, and I was trying to actually write short stories. I would just get really bored of writing something really long. So it's like an entire novel compressed into a page.
That's tricky. That's one of the hardest things to do, actually.
But I think that it's the most effective in terms of actually getting stuff done, because novels take people, it's a decade of work, and then you finish something and then you're basically shaking over it. If you can write a story a week, then you can just be like,
They're so fun to read too. I remember just
exactly.
going through like Philip K. Dick's short stories, and they're just like, it's like, wow, how did you do that? It's in just like a couple pages, and you're just like, full drama.
Given a deadline, so I was like, I had 2 hours. I'm like, okay. And I was like,
yeah, I hope you do put those out.
And then in that case, it's kind of weird because I said the simulation can't exist, but I've invoked this mythical quantum computer in which obviously the simulation can be open-ended and do cool stuff. And who is to know that we aren't in a quantum simulation somewhere? But all I would say recursively is it has to be embedded, has to be embodied somewhere.
Yeah.
At some point.
Right.
Sorry.
You're just kicking the can. Basically, if you these arguments, like the computer's got to be built out of something at the bottom of the day. At the bottom,
you can be false and say the universe is a simulation; it creates itself. And I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know. That kind of breaks my brain. I want to hear more about how studying how to build a life form leads you to looking for aliens, and what's the path of this? Where are you at with it? Do you got a little proto life forms going, or is this what's the schedule for that you imagine? Will it take many generations of scientists, or do you think you're going to finish this?
I think we've got. I think that we have to go all the way back. So I think we have things we could call life forms, but that's because I made them and I'm a life form. So in a way, people are like, you're cheating. So what I'm trying to look for is to kind of instantiate the minimum system that can undergo selection, because I think selection is the force in the universe that gives rise to evolution, that gives rise to life form. So the thinking really came like this: I want to understand how inorganic chemistry made a transition to biology through storing memories in bonds, because that seemed to be the way that, physics is kind of cool, but it's very low memory. It doesn't store much information. As soon as you start to make bonds and molecules, you can store more information, or you can remember the past, and that those molecules can influence the future by being a catalyst. And then you get all the way to biology and technology. So I figured if we could start to understand what life is, and I'm doing this a lot with a collaborator in Arizona State University, Sarah Walker, who's an astrobiologist, physics background, and a theorist. But
we've emailed her many times and she's never responded. So if you could put in a good word for us, we'd appreciate that.
We've been trying to talk to her. We talked to one of her collaborators, Adam Frank. He's going to be on the show, but no word from Sarah Walker.
Yeah, okay. I will tell her what a great time I've had talking to you guys.
that would be fantastic.
Yeah. She's super busy for good reasons, and just it's tough.
Of course.
She's too busy trying to turn the crappy experimental data I give her into theory, probably. That's why she's so busy, because I'm such a bad experimentalist. But yeah, I will. And so this idea is working out what life is. You need to do a number of things. In chemistry, there's so much dogma and all the origin of life people. It's almost like some people are basically like, we're going to do this thing. And like, we're going to make RNA. And then you go like, and then?
The RNA will gradually select itself, and then it will become DNA, and then it'll become encapsulated.
You made it in the lab. It tells you nothing.
Yeah.
And so I really think looking at life as a real-time process emerging in the lab has to be done. If we can do that in real time and measure it with some kind of device, then we can go look for it elsewhere.
I guess it tells you about conditions, right? I mean,
it tells you about conditions. Yeah, exactly. And also, there's a lot of alien life in the universe, I would guess, but we're not going to be able to interact with most of it because it's so weird. We just not wrong time scale, wrong chemistry, no language. So we say, right, wouldn't it be great if we can just pinpoint? Now we've got James Webb and maybe Hubble working together and say, okay, let's make some kind of some constraints and say, we'll look for rocky planets that have water on them, because we know that gives rise to life. We'll look for some more carbon, because look, it happened for us. And timescale for carbon, chemistry, water, nanoseconds, milliseconds, hours, a few days. Cool. 100 million years, we can make, blobs, right? And so if we constrain how we can turn inorganic chemistry into life in the lab, we can constrain where we look in the universe. And that's the rough idea. That's actually quite a good idea, I think, because it allows us to perhaps kind of stop over speculating what might be out there and too far to get to. And then do something locally and look at what are the remote signatures of selection and evolution. A good one actually is Technetium. I'm just teaching right now medicinal chemistry. Technetium is an artificial element. It's made in a nuclear reactor. We use it for like a type of emission tomography. So you can basically image very high resolutions, very high energies, tissue, looking for tumors and things. Technetium cannot form naturally. If you found this, if you saw a kind of a spectrum of light that's you could then lock back to the nuclear transitions in technetium, that aliens made that for sure, because you had to basically build a nuclear reactor, get the uranium, refine it all, and so on. It just cannot occur in any physical anomaly that we know of. And if you find, it's literally like finding a 747 on Mars.
I love what you said about the timescales of life. I think about that all the time. Like you just look around, even in our local environment. Like we have a cat. The cat's not going to live as long as we do. Their timescales of existence are totally different, and it's easy to imagine life forms that have really long timescales, even such that we wouldn't even be able to capture them because we wouldn't see it as intelligent behavior.
You live and die in the period that the life form undergoes one respiratory cycle.
That's really fascinating, or the scale of it too. I mean, from what we can tell, the universe is unbelievably large, and that's only as far as we can see, and it's hard to even fathom how big the structures could be, or to what extent life is expressing itself.
I wonder, though, if there isn't a certain determinism here on Earth in a laboratory condition which would just spit out more versions of life as it already is.
I think that's probably easy to show that that's not going to happen, and I'll tell you why super quickly. This is something that actually the chemists, they all disagree with me, all of them, right? It's like really funny. If we played cards and I got a royal flush, played poker, you'd be like, wow, I've never seen that before. And probably never see it again. But just because you get a royal flush once, most people are like, yeah, we can get a royal flush again, no problem. Now, if you think about it, all the chemistry we have on Earth is so contingent upon interactions of minerals, chance events, a callus. In fact, any molecule you find on Earth that's got a molecular weight, I have to think about this carefully. Any molecule, not polymer, like tar or something, any molecule has a molecular weight probably greater than about 300 mass units on Earth, has somehow been interacted with or invented by evolution. That's kind of insane. So if you go back to the origin of Earth, where all the molecules are really small, I think there is such a vast chemical space available, there's literally zero chance you're going to get the life we have now. And except that there's planet Earth and we're not changing the chemistry and the physics of planet Earth, and maybe there is some global constraints to some aspects of the chemistry, but I think it's very easy to show almost on the back of an envelope or a post-it note why mathematically you're not going to get the same molecules. You might get similar solutions, but not the same. And that's one of the things I want to do. Wouldn't it be great if someone gave me a planet and I knew roughly how long to get life? Say, right, here's a planet in 100 million years, go. Here's another planet 100 million years, go. And then look at the chemistry. Well, we can't do that. I'm stuck with a laboratory. I'm fortunate to have a very nice laboratory. And so I just take 2 different experiments, do chemistry, start with the same conditions, let them go in different directions and see how divergent they are.
And what do you see?
Sorry?
What do you see?
We see very small divergences, and we're starting to see how they fingerprint uniquely. And we have to do quite long-term experiments, but we are beginning to make. This really screws with everyone's head. I love this. We're doing experiments that are reproducibly irreproducible, and that's what we want. We want to reproducibly produce unique trajectories in the space. Once you have a complicated enough brew. What you need are minerals, silica surfaces, and you need to then recirculate, recurse. So, and with that, you start to see sharp divergences. And I think that once we prove that robustly in the next couple of years, I've got a couple of papers out there. People will look back on those papers and say that was the first step towards life.
Wow, so that basically implies that life could be happening in environments completely foreign to us as well, which is quite a bit different than most people in exobiology think about life. And obviously that's probably because you want to look for places that are more guaranteed because they look like Earth or something like that. But what's kind of interesting about that also is that we're not even totally sure that life on Earth came from Earth necessarily. And so maybe the oven that we're looking for is somewhere else. Like the kitchen is in a different environment altogether.
Yeah, it could. I mean, life on Earth got going really quickly after the planet was formed. So there's one, and if you think about the origin of life as being, I view it like the reason I'm in my lab, I've got this robot I made, been making last few years called the Chemputer, which is this programmable organic synthesis machine. And the reason I made it is actually it's kind of a sleight of hand because I needed to build infrastructure for origin of life grid. And when I asked for money for I was like, I'm going to ask for $1 billion to make an origin of life experiment, like the Large Hadron Collider. I was like, obviously, okay, I'll ask for, £500,000, please, for a little experiment to see if this works. I went, no, that's ridiculous. Don't do that. We don't care. No robots, no origin of life. And I said, okay, can I have robots to make drugs? And they were like, cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of idea, right? That you want to be able to look at these different conditions and see how different they are and look for divergences in the chemical space and do it reliably and reproducibly. And we're very close to doing it. And I think it's really exciting because it's the chemists right now, chemistry is a bit stuck with the origin of life fairy story. But that's what happens in any, it's great that we've got people arguing about it. People may be worried because they want Nobel Prizes or they want Nobel Prize for doing this thing. Okay, great. Nobel Prize could be great, but you know what I want more than Nobel Prize? Solve the origin of life. If someone said you can have a Nobel Prize or solve the origin of life, I would solve the origin of life every damn time. No Nobel Prize. Who cares? So, and more than the origin of life, I would like to reproducibly be able to make different life forms go, here's a life form experiment I did yesterday, and look, it's made this weird genetic material. And look at this life form we made last year, and it's made this different genetic material. And look at this, and look at this, and look at this, and just show how chemistry interacting in time across metabolic, metabolisms, different length scales, and so on. Because you imagine planets where you have a different gravitational force, different chemistry is going to work. Everyone says that Earth is kind of took slow to get to intelligence because we had to, go for a Cambrian explosion, meteorite, get rid of the dinosaurs. It could be that Earth is in the slow school because we got the wrong gravitational constant.
Yeah, or the atmosphere was wildly thicker, or like any other, circumstances were different. They're still trying to make sense of where all this water came from too, and it seems like, some of the earliest records show that there was a lot of water there in the first. We're finding water underneath, like several oceans worth of water embedded in this ringwoodite down in the. What are they? The little interstitial transition zones, in the mantle.
And there's also tons of life down there. Like you can dig down 1 kilometer and find bacteria, which really, to me, brings notes of Thomas Gold, where it's like, well, what if life is constantly coming from the depths and surfacing? Like Nick Lane does his work he's trying to recapitulate the origin of life from these smoker vents at the bottom of the oceans. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's communities there, but what if the life is not forming at the vents? What if life ends up at the vents because it's coming from somewhere deeper?
Talking to Nick's going to be...
I like that idea. So Nick doesn't subscribe to this. Nick is very...
I was going to say he has a completely opposite take of you, that life would be the same essentially everywhere, I think. Exactly. And it'll be really interesting because he's going to come on the show, I think sometime this
November.
month. Yeah, November. So I'll be very curious to compare your perspectives.
So I think that it's kind of interesting that probably so what happens is that you get convergence in the environment. But let's just pretend you've got a continued life production machine deep in the bottom somewhere where it's so hot. They say the interface between the mantle going up, that there's just no life, all carbon burnt, no bonds, right? And then basically it's cooled down. You've got a flux of material and it's going up, and you've got this gradient. It could be that light, the molecules, the replicators that give rise to biology being continually created, but because as you get more complex, you go up. There's an existing metabolism. It just takes those molecules, say, yum, thanks, can reconvert them. So life is this planetary phenomena. But I bet you that you find other planets, the life will be completely different. And to answer your question about life on other planets, I wonder, and actually a number of people have had this idea, but I think I would attribute this idea to Steve Benner. And what Benner says, basically, I had this idea is that we're all Martians, really, or the replica that basically Mars became more chemically interesting early than Earth. Earth was just forming. It was a kind of just a big mess. And Mars was kind of wet. It had an atmosphere, good chemistry. So it was cooking up, searching chemical space before Earth. And it just basically ejected some replicators, some other molecules that it had spent a longer time making onto Earth. And Earth went, oh, cheers. And those overtook the planet. And we're in fact Martians. And we had it's almost like having a telescope with two mirrors. You can see further into the cosmos. We'll have a life machine with two planets where they're working together, cross-seeding. Your chances of basically doing some really weird stuff goes up quite dramatically.
I mean, it might be even more painfully complex than that if you think about Mars getting their life from somebody else potentially too. I mean, we know there's these interstellar objects now that seem quite regular. I mean, it's not completely inconceivable. Like bacterial spores are incredible.
Say probabilistically, it's vastly improbable. In fact,
it's a long distance.
The probability of that happening would be, one in, I don't know, 10 to the 100 or something. So maybe not quite that poor, but really low. And I think it's a valid thought experiment. And what we should do is say, let's work it out. Let's say, what is the density of stuff? How does it survive? What is the maximum complexity we've attributed to the stuff? Because actually the stuff we've found in the floating around in space is pretty dumb. And one of the things I want to do, and I hope to do with a space agency soon, is to basically take our life detector we've built, because we've built one in a lab, and basically just go say, how far away from Earth can we go before we don't detect evidence of life using this detector? So detect evidence of, DNA, proteins, and complex molecules.
Like send some kind of satellite that's sampling?
Exactly. And just say, how far can you go before you basically, and you have some spectroscopy as well, so you can shine light and maybe have some photography. So how far can you go before these modalities tell you, and then you look at the planetary scale and say, well, the planet's changing color, there's changing composition, we can see that. And you might be able to see that from quite far away, because we want to look at exoplanets and say, what exoplanets are, dead, always going to be dead ends. Origin of life is coming, alive and technological, post-technological, and then maybe back to dead again. And you would not be able to tell the difference whether it was once technological or not. It's just dead. So those 5 classes of exoplanets exist, right? Because we're one of them. We have technology on them, we have life on them,
I mean, my instinct is that you will never stop, and this is probably wrong, but my instinct is that you will never stop finding these molecules. Like I have a feeling that viruses might be the origin point of life, because they're basically these little encapsulated chunks of stuff that in the right conditions with something that could provide the machinery for replication that evolved chemically, abiotically, when paired with something like a virion, could produce a viable form of life.
Yeah. I think that viruses might be, it might be one mechanism, it might be more than one mechanism, but let me give you one plausible mechanism of life from inorganic chemistry. Inorganic chemistry, basic elements, you get some minerals formed, some clays, some simple organics. The organics react. There's some oxygen around, some hydrogen, whatever, CO2, depending. Take Nick Lane's view, take whatever you don't mind, some energy, start to create some molecules. Those molecules then will undergo selection and become catalysts for themselves. And then those molecules will want to persist in time. So they'll create a genetic material, let's say, and let's say the genetic material, a chance that the molecules could get together in a bubble. So we're down in a bubble, literally a soap bubble, not like not a virtual bubble, but a bubble. And then you get more catalysis going on. Then the bubble gets broken apart because of natural forces. As these things might find themselves undergoing more and more cycles of interaction, they might find a way to develop a surfactant sheet, lipid bilayer, reproduce the genetic material over time, keep basically aggregating across a network. And that the initial viruses were really like only functionally alive when they were in a network talking to one another. And then the next evolution was like, the problem is when you get kicked out of a network, we all die. Why don't we all get closer and closer and closer together and basically share resources? And before you know it, the network shrinks right down to you have a minimal viable unit of life, which is a cell or a bacterial cell. And even they're not just minimally viable units, need other stuff. So I think that your thought experiment is entirely plausible. I do think the viruses now are completely different because they are now trained to be parasitic on living cells. And wouldn't it be great? And I think this happens, but I need to check. So I think you've just invented an experiment.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great?
That's experiment number 2 we've invented.
But this is really good. Wouldn't it be good if we could get certain minimum number of viruses and put them together in an environment and they are able to uniquely replicate themselves without having to transfect another cell?
That'd be huge, yeah.
Well, I think it must have been done. It feels like one of those stupid experiments I just invented, or you just invented, by the way. We'll blame you. And it's already been done. But look, there are some big viruses out there, megaviruses, which are almost cells, like megavirus. They have some organelles. So they're evidence of other stuff going on. And I think you'll find the initial life forms are just really huge, mushy viruses were like together. They're like they were forced to be together because they could turn over and evolve more quickly. And they're able to just persist in time for longer. And that's probably how life got going. And then it got just shrunk down. And we have the ribosome. The ribosome is the single biggest achievement of planet Earth to date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always been surprised that it's so difficult to evaluate whether or not there are signatures of life on other planets, right? Because we've sent landers and we've done kind of experiments, and the reaction has been that it's very inconclusive. But I'm like, has nobody sent a sequencer?
No, but look, so, okay, let's go back. So you're then saying sequencers only work with current technology on Earth. Sequencers are Earth-bound. They won't detect alien DNA.
They might. They might.
Can demonstrate that's impossible.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that what if there's DNA there?
Sure, if there's DNA on Mars, we put it there most certainly. But let's go back a step because you're asking a really important question. Say, landers have gone to other planets. Why have they not detected life? And then you followed up. Why didn't they send a sequencer? The reason they didn't send life is they did exactly what you just said, but not, they didn't have sequencers back with Viking. They sent other things. So what you've got to ask yourself is like, well, actually, what is life? What are we looking for? And this is where I started trying to think, what is the ground truth for life? And developing a new technique that would actually find life forms independent of the technology that produced them.
Mm-hmm. What is your definition for life, real quick?
So the definition of life is the only definition you actually need functionally is so I'll tell you what a universal signature of life is, and then I'll tell you what the definition. So the universal signature of life is are complex objects made in abundance that are so complex they wouldn't occur in the natural background. And the nice thing about that, I'll say that again, a complex object made in abundance. So take something like strychnine, a molecule, really complicated, the probabilistic space associated with strychnine, that you could randomly get a single strychnine molecule, but the chances of you getting two are low. 3 lower still, 4 even lower. When you get to enough to detect, it has to be made by a causal chain in a biology that's that. And a lot of chemists refuse to believe that. They think that molecules are magic, that the rate constants to make the molecules somehow written on the bonds. It's not the truth, because combinatorial explosion would just make a massive mess. And why should that molecule exist? And what I've been able to show in my work with my team and collaborators is that if a molecule has 15 parts or more, and you can detect it in abundance, you know that life made it. And so what you really want to go and do is you want to look for evidence of molecular complexity using a mass spectrometer, or we want to find some way of shining light on things.
And you don't think that that's like environment dependent? Like there's not some undiscovered environment somewhere in the galaxy that's capable of constructing those? There's just like like you said, there's
life.
Okay, yeah. So life.
If you say you've got I'm saying is there's a random walk on a graph that gives you an object that's 15. It's like, go back to your pack of cards. If you keep getting a royal flush, what does it tell you about the deck of cards?
It's rigged.
Thank you.
I see. So yeah. So can you sum up your definition for life?
So is the definition of life something that's capable of making complex molecules?
In abundance.
Fascinating.
How simple is that? It's like,
how do you define can you define the complex molecule by a threshold?
I think that it was larger than 300 atomic weights.
So what we've got is we've got this way of roughly, but really it's the number of parts. So what we've found is if a molecule has more than 15, can be broken into 15 unique units or more, then it's too complex to have arisen by chance, because what you've got is you've basically got 15 factorial or something combinations, right? You've got this huge space of combinations, and you've got 1 million identical objects. And so all it says is like some information has made that molecule. Now, if you don't like the threshold on Earth, you're like, don't have 15. Just go, as you keep going, 16, 17, 18, the combinatorial space gets bigger and bigger and bigger. In fact, hell, just pick 100. So there are some molecules in biology that have an assembly index of 100. And the chances of finding that, you can do the combinatorial math. In fact, you would need, if a molecule had an assembly index of 100, you would need probably about 10 universes, and you'd need to flick all the atoms in 10 universes, and even then, you wouldn't make more than one molecule. Think about that. All the mass, 10 to the 80 kilograms, 10 times, 10 to the 90 kilograms. Flick all those like dice, you still wouldn't make that molecule. Insane.
Interesting. So there's like your definition for life has this threshold for complexity, which is critical to it. That's
yes.
Really fascinating.
And complexity is naturally done in steps of selection. So selection can occur in dead universes, but as that selection produces more and more complexity, that produces objects in in abundance, unique objects in abundance, they then can act on themselves in a causal chain and start to undergo evolution by building their own.
So there's a feedback element to it as well.
Yes.
It seems.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of only definition of life we need. We should do away with it needs metabolism, it needs to be this, it needs to be that. It's the only one we need. And I'm trying to convince NASA to adopt it. But the kind of the politics of adopting these things, you get 10 astrobiologists in a room. And I think it goes back to electricity. I love around this time when we were like trying to work out what electricity was, because there were people going, what is a liquid? And people like going, oh, it's this and it's that. And I feel that for the last 20, 30 years, this is the same problem we've had with the origin of life and also defining life. Like, it's this, no, it's that, no, it's this other thing. And then everyone has their pet definition, which is like oh yeah, and it's this and this and this and my favorite thing. And so what I wanted to do is say, well, let's not worry about that. Can we characterize what life uniquely does on Earth? Make technological artifacts, make complex molecules, make memes. So, and if we can somehow quantify those in a framework that allows you to do an agnostic experiment. So then you don't need to send a sequencer to Mars or to Titan or anything. You send a mass spectrometer. And what I've been able to do is detect in my lab, because when a mass spectrometer is a machine that weighs a molecule, put it in a gas phase. But what you can do when you take that molecule and you put it and you detect it by the weight is you can hit it with some energy and it falls apart. But when the molecule falls apart, it falls apart in a fingerprint way, and you can count the number of fragments. And the good news is that NASA's been developing this technology now to send to different planets for 20, 30 years. All they need to do is send a machine with a slightly higher resolution, and which they've already got planned, and we'll be able to detect life in the solar system if it exists.
I mean, I love it. We've asked a lot of different people for a definition of life, and I think that is the simplest one that anybody's ever given. And I think that simplicity in science is really key, because that's what allows you to, instead of having all of these crazy listicles, yeah. Like, so it's actually really interesting, because one of the key advances in electricity was this guy Dufay. And Dufay was the first one to really carefully categorize things and really create a systematic way for being able to treat the effects and how they worked. And that was the thing that allowed people to make the next step of actually harnessing the technology to do something. And the definitions in science are so vital, and people will gloss over them, or like you said, they'll make these pet definitions that serve their own purposes, as opposed to searching for this incisive thing that is just at the point of the spear, so to speak. And so that's very, very cool.
When I first invented it, everyone was really angry with me. They still are.
That's a good sign.
And they were like, it's obvious. We know that. I'm like, where's it written down? We know that. So I was like, and it kind of annoyed me. I was like, well, what do you want me to do then? You want me to make it like my pet definitions? Like, if the life form writes Lee Cronin, then it's a life form. It's like, no, look, if the object, and they were saying, but life makes simple things as well. I'm like, no, look, if you want to characterize, so the background can make simple molecules. I'm breathing out CO2 all the time, simple molecule. My CO2 is evidence that I'm here respiring, but it's not distinguishable from the background. So we need to find, what does life do that's distinguishable from the non-life background? And it's make, comedy and porcelain and complex molecules and technology. And molecules are a type of technology. And people get really confused. They say, but a molecule can't be alive. And I'm like, are you really alive? You're a collection of molecules in a cell doing stuff. And the fact you're able to instantiate this kind of framework, you're outputting objects that I can measure. And then because I always viewed the origin of life and making artificial life a bit like I still do. This is what Sarah Walker and I want to do. We want to basically build an origin of life machine, but a bit like inspired by CERN. And that's why, part of what CERN did, said, right, we've got the standard model. That's great. Standard model predicts, if we then go and do simulations, that we'll get a peak for the Higgs at this energy level. Okay, we need to build a machine that can access this energy level. Let's make sure we can collide the particles together and create these energies, and let's have some detectors and look for it. So that's theory, model, experiment, detection. So our theory for life is complexity assembly. Okay, that's a kind of the theory. Let's do the model. Threshold is 15. Let's build an experiment. We built the experiment, like just put a load of random stuff in a pot that's simple and just shake it, and then look for the assembly index to go up. Or it's actually more the assembly, but that's more nuanced about causation. And then you'll find a life form.
And where are you at? How many assembly steps along are you?
We're getting there, actually. We've found ones that are really quite weird. And the problem I have now, it's clear that those high assembly numbers were put in by the chemist. And so what we've got to do is to say, okay, so let's go back even simpler. But I do think we're very close to finding a chain of events that will eventually give rise to a replicating, mutating thing that, again, the listicles you'll get, right? It's like, can it do this thing? Check. Can it do this thing? Check. Can it crawl out of the test tube and wander down the corridor? check, But I think it's like this higher dimensional readout is this complexity beyond this threshold in abundance you can detect. And I invented the theory in a mass spectrometer many years ago, and and then everyone said no, and then everyone kind of said, "Oh, maybe it works." And still now, people are struggling, and I'm having complexity theorists tell me why I'm an idiot, kind of complexity explaining me, which I think is quite fun. They're like, "You don't know anything about complexity," and that's actually untrue. I do know something. I've been studying it since I was 18. But I was in a learning difficulty school when I was reading my complexity books, right? Determined to not be able to do mathematics, read or write. So maybe the guy's right, I'm an idiot. But it's an interesting idiot space to be.
I mean, I think that ideas that simplify dramatically are almost always disdained at first because people don't want things to be simple. And again,
good ideas are often always rejected. There's like the William James thing of people essentially saying you're an idiot, and then they're like, once it becomes obvious that it's too apparent for it to be idiocy, then they're like, okay, well, you're going about this wrong or something, and then finally they're kind of like, yeah, well, we knew everything all at once. So if people are coming at you with all three of those steps at once, I think that's a really good sign. I wanted to ask you about extremely complex life too, like why we don't see it. What's your I know this is outside of your wheelhouse, but you must think about it a bit. Why does life not want to be seen? Is the time scales wrong? Where are the other people?
The great filter doesn't exist. The great filter was a lack of imagination. So the chances of another Earth nearby producing beings that respire on this timescale, that have language and invent technology to come and see us, quite low. I think there's complex life everywhere. But if you think about it, it's going to be so weird because we yet haven't used, and it's going to sound really arrogant. I don't mean it to be. I think in this assembly theory that I've been developing with Sarah and her team and my team, I think if we use assembly theory in SETI, we'll find life everywhere in the universe. It's my hunch. I think that what we need to do is look for complex objects with copies that couldn't be created by the random background and pinpoint there. And then also, I would ask the question back to you, so what are you expecting to see? We are living in an expanding universe, sadly. The speed of light is the speed of light, sadly. And it takes a certain amount of time for life to get going. And if let's say we're typical or a little bit slow, it takes roughly 4 billion years. And sadly, after that 4 billion years has happened, we are quite far away from our neighbors. So there is a fundamental limit so built into the universe about the fact that we aren't able to talk to ourselves. So it's entirely obvious we are alone right now. But I think we have to go through the solar system and look to see if we can find life in the outskirts of the solar system. It's going to be harder because there's less energy. We might find entirely different life forms on the outskirts of the solar system. They're going to be super simple because not enough energy, not enough time, and all that, or not enough flux to really churn through and make complex life. But if we can find slime on Europa that's made of completely different genetic material, we'll probably be pretty confident there's life elsewhere in the universe, and there's probably complex life. But then we've got to reframe our way for looking for it, and we haven't yet found the way to correctly adjust our equipment to see that abundant complexity. And the more abundant complexity, the more aliens there are. So I think that they are out there. They're just very far away.
I love that. I mean, that's a much more optimistic view of the universe than, we spin alone in a glowing blue orb that is utterly alone in the black velvet of night. That's a really, really depressing way of seeing the world. And I think that's a common way of seeing the world too.
Well, that's why I keep saying to the taxpayers around the world, pay me or not just me, anyone, pay me, give me money. And saying, I think it is important for the future of humanity to try and create life in the lab. I would say that, right? Give me money. But I genuinely believe it's not just about me. It's about, are we alone in the universe? Is there something we can do locally to prove we're not alone in the universe? If we can do that, that will be really nice for us to think about what is our future of planet. what do we want to do? What do we want the future of biology to be on Earth, or life to be on Earth? Let's say not biology, life. And and what might we expect elsewhere culturally, and what is worth preserving and why, and give us a bit of context to remove that loneliness.
It's funny because people always behave better in company than they do when they're by themselves, and so this is kind of cosmic company that can perhaps order humanity a little bit.
We might just find some aliens and say, "Do you have politicians as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have TikTok?"
TikTok is definitely everywhere in the universe.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear some good alternatives to politicians. Actually, that would be
find them.
Revolutionary.
We'll find them. In the end, it's going to be entirely obvious that you would not take floor. You would not. I mean, it's like I got into trouble, right, a few months ago for saying something about someone in a private conversation that I never met that person to have. Anyway, got into trouble, and I was talking to someone. They gave me a Noel Coward quote, which was like, "People take offense whilst they admire or accept insincerity or deception." And there's this problem in our society that we don't mind being deceived, but we hate being insulted on social media. It's like, okay, so I'm going to lie to you that I'm going to do this thing in power, and you still vote for me. And so that's why democracy is going through this really weird thing right now. I think we need to understand the cognitive dissonance associated, but we'll get through it. We won't destroy ourselves. We're kind of like, our human race is doing great. We're being nicer to each other. We're growing more food. We are aware of our environmental limitations. Okay, there's a war right now by the mad guy, but hopefully the numbers of mad guys, it would be great if we had equal rights. Like there'd be a mad girl having a war. It's like at least we got gender parity on the war front. But we should have no war, no politicians creating this. But it's kind of out of my
definitely way less than in the past, which is something they get skipped over. It's kind of interesting that there is a pretty powerful branch of the political underworld that sees the fractures in democracy and thinks, okay, let's just get rid of democracy, which is it's fascinating. It's quite a popular idea.
Listen to what's happening in Iran right now. We are so lucky to be able to have this conversation, and maybe I could say, I don't know, make some comment about like what I think of a politician and not go to jail, or not have the morality police. I didn't know there were such things as morality police. In Iran, right? And yes, it's kind of comical in the US with some things, and I think it's hilarious how legislators are kind of weaponizing, reproductive rights. And how we have all these things, but we'll get through it because we're going to look at them. We're going to ask ourselves, why are we taking sides and taking rights away from one another? How can we not take sides, give each other more rights, and make things better? And what are we doing to each other by, activating our pathways that we needed when we were basically tribal and fighting and trying to survive? We're activating pathways that we needed to get food and avoid being conflict or take part in a conflict now. And that will come with time, I'm sure, because I think I can't imagine a human being on planet Earth who doesn't have more fun collaborating and making fun of each other and doing cool stuff than, other than people that are ill, right? So psychopaths, and all that. But most people actually like to have fun with each other.
This is Richard Watson's work. I think he's at the University of Southampton, where he is working on a theory of natural induction as opposed to natural selection, where the idea is that we always look at the universe and at life as being a product of this red in tooth and claw sort of competition. But in reality, a lot of systems evolve by just decreasing conflict. And
you need both, right? He's putting a word on it, but I think what he's saying, induction, evolution, I think they are the same mechanism is driving them. I wonder if you need a little bit more abstraction to go for induction. Basically it's like the dumb bacteria have to fight because they don't have any way. Now you've got an imagination. There's great human beings can play hockey games and they can have their war in the hockey game or on the chessboard. I'll probably get shot, not shot for saying this, but I was like, why can't Ukraine and, well, let's not talk about the current conflicts. It's not fair because there are people getting killed and all sorts of things. But why can you have a, say, right, the winner of this game of chess gets to, control this city for a millisecond? I don't know. I think that there are lots of problems there. I am not qualified as a chemist to say very much about it, other than observe there is an interesting relationship between selection and existence and cooperation in chemical systems. How does that manifest in biology is, I think, a question for how biologists work. Then how we go into social systems above that, but they are all related. No origin of life, no biology, no biology, no philosophy. We're no philosopher, no philosophy. So you have this chain of, origin of life, chemistry, biology, philosophy.
Do you think that science can explain everything?
I think science can give us explanations that will allow us to have more causal power. I think that's maybe the role of science through technology. I think that I have not yet appropriately thought enough about stuff. So my philosophy is terrible because I say to some philosophers, if you can't falsify, I don't want to talk to you. And they look quite sad. I'm like, okay, we'll have a beer. Screw falsification for a night. Let's just talk stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I'm an experimental theoretician. I don't have the intellect to basically do theory in a vacuum. I have to basically get dirty with stuff and then build an intuition and then build the theory and then go around the cycle.
Mm-hmm. Which seems like an absolutely vital part of the conversation. Otherwise, we're just playing with hieroglyphics at the end of the day.
Yeah. You're hoping. Well, I'm playing with stuff, and I'm so curious about how stuff behaves. One of the things I love being in science, why I love being science, is I'm always surprised. I'm like, I did that and that happened. It's like, wow. And everyone's like, that's in the literature already. I'm like, I'm glad I haven't read the literature for one. Oh my God, you invented this thing that exists already. And I'm like, well, I was just happy for a millisecond, right? It's like, it's not about being the first. It's about the act of interacting in your environment and observing something that you think is interesting and say, what is the mechanism for that? How did that happen? Is this a phenomena that's worth understanding? And I guess different people are driven by different things, but my curiosity is probably unbounded at this point.
I think there's really something to learn there about how these leaps of innovation occur, in that they usually happen by multiple people at once. If you look back across the history of science, there's always people fighting over who came up with it first. And I think that's really interesting. It's almost like the world made it possible for these people to see these connections all at once. It's quite fascinating.
And
which links us.
Sorry.
Oh, what I was going to say just links back to this idea of novelty. Like, where does novelty come from? And it seems to come as an emergent property of the time.
I mean, there are lots. I mean, we have this argument in academia right now because some people say academia is good, some are bad, and lone genius is bad, and groups great, and all this. And look, they're all sorts. All I know is when I came up with assembly theory, there was nothing else out there. And then when I was speaking with my colleague Sarah, I think that she'd invented the same theory, but we were using such different language. I was like, I'm not sure. And then it turned out it probably was. So but then you've got two lunatics. Now I think we've got our groups. So now we've got 12 lunatics. And there's some people fighting and said that's not right. And now soon, you'll have this whole bunch of people that will sort out the problem because we can't sort it out on our own. We need our teams. And it's nice to see something for the first time. I mean, I have an ego created by evolution to stop me killing myself, right? So this kind of, if you get kind of fooled into thinking you're first at doing something a bit, it's quite good. But I do think we are, even if it's delayed, I mean, we're relativity, right? I mean, Einstein was a genius. But when we started throwing satellites into space and we're losing time with frame grabbing, we would have gone, there's something wrong here. We have to rethink gravity. And so, I find it often interesting to think about what leaps people have made, which are so far in the future. How were they able to make them? normally they were able to make them because they came in as outsiders. They had other experience. And they just went, why did that happen? I mean, Newton didn't invent gravity, but he kind of invented gravity.
In terms of pull, yeah, in terms of the pull of one body upon another, yeah. And there's so much work to be done on all of those too, which is so fascinating. I mean, Einstein had the ability to think about things and play with these ideas because he was already like stupidly famous for the photoelectric effect, which is a very technologically practical innovation by itself. He could have stopped there for sure. I mean, most people think he got his Nobel Prize for gravity or for light, but it was actually for something very technological. So I think he had a lot of time to step back from, and I don't know about time, but he had a lot of peace of mind to really.
He just has one of those minds where he was like, he wasn't doing it. He's just doing it for shits and giggles because he's curious. But yeah, why is that? Why that? Brownian mode. I mean, look at, he did a lot of engineering really well, a lot of deep science really well. And I think this is why I kind of try and discourage people from being, looking down on engineers or looking down on science, I love being an engineer. I really want to do engineering to get robots to do chemistry for me. I need the robots to do the chemistry to crack the origin of life. I don't know what the mechanism is. I don't know what the mechanism that increases complexity at the molecular level. I think it's molecular replicators working in a certain way, reading out the environment. I think it's obvious, and I think I can show it. But, thinking is obvious and thinking you can show it is a different thing to actually doing the experiment. And I'm sure we'll find out other things.
Have you added like structural complexity of the environment to your experiments? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And this is the thing, what happens, right? You have this frozen accident that is the environment. So that environment is like basically it's not yet a memory, it's just an accident. So it's like random, but it's not. It's like it's just the environment that has a texture, but it's unique. And if the chemistry can read out unique texture and copy it into itself, and then use that to get away from the random soup and make something more sophisticated, then the chances of those molecules interacting with themselves selectively and then being fitter in the environment to survive goes up. And that's all that. That's all it is.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of Nick Lane's theory, where he basically explained the iron-sulfur cluster as being something that's inside of the membranes of these hydrothermal vents, which then is copied all over the place in biology because it's this electron carrier in tons of proteins.
I mean, I don't think Nick is entirely right in a lot of things he talks about, but I think and it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. I think the ideas are really simple. They're really interesting and testable. And I think that I would agree with him on Earth how this all works, and I would say on the different planets it's going to be different. They'll be different, and I think that's the only place where Nick and I diverge. Actually, it's kind of interesting. He loves the molecules of biology, and also likes the idea of having electrochemical gradient. I don't have any problem with any of that, and I think you're right. Having those minerals trapped in biology as remnants of what happened. I just think you can probably trap different minerals in different biological entities. It wouldn't be cool if I could make an artificial mineral in my lab. This is what I'm inorganic chemist, so I could do that. I put that in my origin of life engine, and it makes protein or the new types of protein with that mineral in, and deploys that as a technology to do whatever electron transfer.
It's going to be really fun to talk to Nick and then think about these ideas some more. I hope we can catch up with you down the road after we learn more about the subject, and maybe we'll even get you guys in a room together at some point.
Yeah, I've never met him.
Excellent. That sounds very promising. I like that.
It's like a challenge. I would be happy to. Anyway, been great to talk to you.
It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for giving us your time.